few comments here. We've got London was mostly built by one-legged black trans queer lesbians from Wakanda Bow.
True. Historical fact. Unassailable historical fact.
Hedgehog Dilemma says, with London demographics going the way they are, I feel a strange sense of pathos listening to Bo. A real Londoner speak about the history of the city. It's like that photo of the last Barbary lion. I don't think there's going to be any shortage of Londoners, ever, really.
Cool, blimey, governor, an authentic Londoner, so are you.
Yeah, they're all in bloody Devon and Cornwall these days, pushing up our house prices. Hedgehog's Dilemma, I rewatched From Hell, thanks to Bo, Jack the Ripper segment. Not the best film, but there's an eerily prescient scene where the Met Police destroy evidence in order to protect ethnic minorities. I didn't know that.
Heather Graham in it. Quite like her.
I don't know who she is.
Oh, just an actress. But yeah, in that film, they have it that it's like that theory that it's one of the royal doctors, or one of the royal, well, a really eminent surgeon of the day is Jack the Ripper, and that was always fanciful. It's good for a screenwriter. It's fine. Make a movie like that if you want to. It's fine, but it's just not.
Makes it an interesting story.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway. Today we're going to be talking about how the left can't stop Trump, because none of their rhetoric, none of their methods are really going to do anything. And I wanted to start with this because it was interesting. And I think it was interesting to lots of people because it's got 250 million views almost. And it is Trump saying, "He who saves his country does not violate any law," which is attributed to Napoleon, but he may or may not have said this.
It's still quite a statement, though, isn't it?
It is. It's
sort of saying, I can and will do anything it takes. It's great. I'm here for it.
I mean, on the one hand, it's sort of good to hear that he's willing to go above and beyond, but also it does seem like ammunition to his detractors a little bit.
It's slightly worrying, because what if in 4 or 8 years' time, Gavin Newsom's saying the same thing, but the other way round?
That's a precedent.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I think that what he's actually responding to is the fact that since he's assumed office, they've been saying Trump can't do this, Trump can't do that, and they're trying to limit his power in a sort of soft way, because obviously I think there's an eight senator majority in the Senate for the Republicans. I think there is a free majority in the House. They have a majority in the Supreme Court, as in Republican appointees. And so this has given Trump unprecedented power for a US president. Normally, at least one branch of government is interfering, and they're not anymore. And of course, it's worth mentioning, and I always like to make this point, that even a tyrannical US president still has, about as much power as your average UK Prime Minister. Make of that what you will, but it's just a little bit of perspective. I'm not saying one is right or wrong.
It's sort of chalk and cheese, but I know exactly what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but yeah, they're different. They're different beasts. Mm-hmm. But you certainly can have more or less powerful presidents, right? You can have a lame duck president. You can have a president who's
Jimmy Carter's a good example. Of that. Didn't really do much.
Or if you've got Congress and the Senate and the Supreme Court against you, yeah, your wings are massively clipped. And Trump, at least in this first period before we get to the midterms, is enjoying a very eminent position.
So he's got until November of 2026, so at least 2 years. But then it is also possible, and I think also likely, that the Republicans could actually increase their majority.
Who knows?
If he's doing a good job and people like what he's doing.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, he could.
It's not usually the case, but who knows?
It's possible. Yeah, usually the incumbent gets a few losses in the midterms, don't they?
Usually, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if he is as genuinely popular as it seems, then yeah.
Well, the thing is also, lots of people on the left are very careful now about how they're assailing him. So they're obviously throwing a lot of mud, and that's what we're going to be looking at today, is they're throwing mud and seeing what sticks. But I think actually they sort of understand that, yeah, actually he won the popular vote, and what he's doing is what he promised, so it's a little bit awkward. But this is the mud that is being slung at the minute. Trump hates the Constitution. Obviously, this was the end of January and it's now halfway through February. But this line has carried on throughout all of the month. And this was just the nicest and clearest way of it being stated. Just that all of a sudden, yeah, I know, the Rolling Stone. All of a sudden, the left, the Democrats, just are darlings of the Constitution. They're diehard constitutionalists. And let's, of course...
Rolling Stone, may I just quickly say, goddamn burnt out hippie commies. Like, won't let it go.
I know.
Damn them.
Let's remind ourselves, is it time to torch the Constitution? This is, of course, opinion. We're living under a flawed Constitution. Let's start fresh and rewrite it. Is it time to scrap the Constitution? The Constitution is sacred. Is it also dangerous? Ooh... dangerous.
Spoken like a true commie.
Constitution. So yeah, obviously we know they don't care one lick about the Constitution. They care about enacting their agenda. I mean, shall not be infringed. I'm gonna, draw a line under that. All of the attempts of Democrats to limit gun rights, as far as I'm concerned, Americans should be able to own whatever they want. From F-15s to handguns.
An F-15?
Yeah, why not?
A howitzer?
Why not?
Sure.
The land of the free, Bo. What are you, a commie?
A small nuclear device. No, I'm playing devil's advocate.
I don't want to be on a watch list, so I can't agree to that one.
Sure. But no, I mean, the Democrats, God, the hypocrisy. Mm-hmm. I remember I can't remember if it was in Obama. No, it must have been the early Biden administration. They wanted to try and increase, they kept making noises about trying to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court in order so that they obviously could pack it. Mm-hmm. Massively unconstitutional. They wanted to make new states, like make DC its own state. Would have been completely riding roughshod over the Constitution. A number of things like this. A great number of things.
Well, they
don't care about the Constitution.
Of course not. And to call forth another recent example, all of the attempts to censor free speech as well. First Amendment, right. Literally the First Amendment in the Constitution, has been one of the things that they have been running roughshod over for years. They've been getting the intelligence agencies to, knock on the door of the social media companies to censor on their behalf. All the Twitter files that Elon Musk released expose this very clearly, that even small accounts parodying Anthony Fauci and things like that, with only a few hundred followers, were getting removed by basically the White House.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's free speech.
People like Benjamin Franklin and Jefferson and Madison and Monroe and John Adams, they'll be spinning in their graves. Perhaps not so much John Adams, but just because of the Alien and Sedition Act. But people like Jefferson will be spinning in their graves to know. Someone like George Washington, who didn't even want parties. He didn't think there should be political factions or parties at all. And now we're where we are.
I think there's something to that, these days.
Yeah. I mean, it's a simpler world, but in theory, the concept of it is sound. It just makes for discord. It just makes for bad government. Anyway, go on.
And where was I? I've completely lost track. I was too busy thinking about the Roman Senate now and how they sort of had factions. So, yes, this is one from the Financial Times. US judges are the last line of resistance against Donald Trump, and this is what's been touted by lots of outlets. There's also The Guardian repeating a similar line here. The courts are a crucial bastion against Trump. What if he ignores their orders? Well,
they need their last line of activist commie judges.
Exactly. And as J.D. Vance here points out earlier in the month, if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the Attorney General in how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. Pretty unassailable argument really there, isn't it?
Yeah. They're supposed to be, of course, completely separate arms of government.
They are. They're meant to...
And the executive
provide checks on each other to a certain extent, but not limit the constitutional powers of certain branches of government.
Yeah, the executive should have primacy over the judiciary. Right.
Well, because, Trump appoints, the president appoints people to the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land. And so if they have the power to appoint the judges, it seems like they have a higher level of authority, don't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is actually more of an interplay, or there is.
It is, yeah.
There'll be Fedora
tippers
in the comments saying, "Oh, you don't understand," but I do. It's obviously, the president can elect or nominate the supreme justices, but then there's a famous quote. I can't remember who it was, or maybe Oliver Wendell Holmes or somebody like that said, who was a Supreme Court justice, said, "The Constitution is whatever the judges say it is." So in those terms, the buck stops with the Supreme Court, not the president. Presidents come and go, but the Supreme Justices stay for life, right? You've got sort of life tenure. But yet it's the executive that gets to appoint them. So it's
not
it's an interesting
clearly one or the
relationship.
other, but there seems to be a bit of a dynamic there, doesn't there?
Yeah.
Which is fair to say.
And it is the... anyway, there's so much that could be said about it, but it's the Supreme Court that says... For example, they can literally just say, no, the Constitution means this. Mm-hmm. We think it means this. And therefore it effectively does now. So like a classic example is when they said slavery is legal. And a few decades later said, actually, no, it wasn't legal. We were wrong. Or they could say child labour is okay. And then decades later say, no, it's definitely not okay. So it's whatever they say it is.
Damn it, spoiled good thing. But the funny thing is, after saying this very reasonable thing, the media comes out again. Alarm as J.D. Vance says federal judges aren't allowed to control the president. Which is the most absurd headline I've ever... It's like, yes, you remember all of those federal judges you elected to oversee the role of the president? Said no one ever?
Yeah.
It's such a transparently silly headline. I don't know whether the journalist... Well, he lives in San Francisco, so actually maybe he is a bit stupid. But... You get the idea. But I saw Cernovich have a pretty good and well-structured explanation of how the judges can't compel Trump to do anything. I do know about all of this. I've actually studied the US political system. I did a politics A-level, if that means anything. In Britain it might. But within that we compared the British and American system, and I spent a whole year studying the American system. So I know all of this, but I know Americans don't like it when I explain their political system. So I've defaulted to another American. Judges can't compel Trump to do anything. The judiciary is a co-equal branch of government. Yes, it is not supreme under the text, history, or structure of the Constitution. Judges are not above the law. If judges issue an unlawful enforcement order, Trump may direct U.S. Marshals, the executive branch, to ignore the judiciary. Some might not like it, but that's what the Constitution provides. Those who are disaffected have democratic remedies and rights. The legislative branch may move to impeach or not, which is what the text of the Constitution allows for. If voters disagree with Congress members' decisions regarding whether to impeach, voters may remove them in the next election or vote to re-elect them. Our system was set up this way to keep power within the people. Voters, not random activist judges. To say otherwise would require one to ignore the United States Constitution's structure, the debates surrounding it, such as the Federalist Papers, and lead the country to a system where judges may act as if they are above the law, which I think is said perfectly, and I can't see anything wrong with this personally.
Nice reference to the Federalist Papers there. I did a long-form bit of content with Benjamin Boyce, the great Benjamin Boyce, talking about the life and career of Alexander Hamilton. Mm-hmm. Check that out. It's on his channel and mine. So, yeah, absolutely right. I don't think he's got anything wrong there. Yeah.
And some of the more astute outlets, here's a Harvard school centre sort of regretfully admitting that actually they're unlikely to save democracy from Trump and Musk's attacks because they don't have the power to. I know they're framing it as protecting democracy, which is obviously BS, but they can also recognise that the Constitution does actually provide Trump the ability to do these things. And even Vox, here we are, Vox, yes, they're still going. Don't expect the courts to save us from Donald Trump. They know that even the courts...
I've got my tiny violin somewhere playing just for Vox.
I'm sure I've got a handkerchief somewhere to dry those leftist tears.
Oh no.
And another thing as well is that they're talking about, can President Trump ignore Congress's spending laws? The debate over impoundment. So this, I'm going to read a little bit from this because this is from NPR, and I found this interesting because it's trying to couch the power of the president to, they have their budget set by Congress, right? But they're trying to couch it in a different way than it's intended. It says, a constitutional conflict is brewing over Congress's power of the purse and whether the president can refuse to spend what Congress has directed him to spend. So the problem isn't that Trump is spending too much, it's that he's not spending enough, which I think is well within his right. He can run the executive however he wishes, and if he wants to spend less money, the power of the purse is to close the purse to the president, not to... That's the intention of it, is to make sure the president doesn't spend too much of the American people's money. And if Trump is saving the money, this is...
yeah, what a weird dynamic, the idea that you've got a budget and you must spend it all.
Mm-hmm.
No,
well,
that's not written in the stars, is it?
If he doesn't want to do it, then he's just going to be forced to waste the American people's money, which is obviously not in the spirit of the law whatsoever. The idea of this check is that you prevent reckless spending, which obviously hasn't worked very well over the years, but nevertheless, that's its intention.
Not to mention that it's money that Congress hasn't even got. It's all sort of made up money anyway.
It is, yeah.
It's sort of almost nonsensical numbers on a bit of paper.
Mm-hmm. Well, basically what this is, it's not about actually spending the money. It's just, you're cutting things that we like. Please stop.
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
Yeah, of course.
And they've also been trying to get this. Democrats say Trump's effort to shut a US aid agency is unconstitutional. This is even more sort of akin to that of a lunatic, right? In that, of course, US aid was set up by JFK by executive order. Trump is dismantling it by executive order, and somehow this is unconstitutional. It was created with the same powers that it's being dismantled from the same office, and somehow the Constitution has changed in that time, has it? It's funny.
Again, it wasn't Franklin, Jefferson, Madison and Adams that decreed that US aid must exist, right? So, yeah, it started in the 60s, and now we're stopping it.
The tea in Boston Harbor is because they wanted US aid.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It's a little known fact. It's actually covered up.
It's been around 60 years. It's fine. You can get rid of it. That can happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
And loads of outlets have been reporting this. NBC News: Trump's efforts to withhold federal funding triggers constitutional showdown. They're not calling it a crisis, that's just a showdown. At least that's a little bit more honest in that it's just a showdown between two sides, rather than saying that it's an actual problem. And here's another one. Trump's disregard for US Constitution, a blitzkrieg on the law, legal experts say. I wonder how these legal experts vote. Yeah, I imagine they're probably Democrats. President's lawlessness in actions such as federal funding freezes and birthright citizenship order is worth mentioning. Isn't that the 14th Amendment? Or whatever, that's what they're trying to argue. And I know I've mentioned it before and people said, actually, no, it's perfectly legitimate to get rid of it. I did say it was baked into the Constitution, but it's not. And I was wrong. And it's good, because I think they should get rid of it.
This is just leftoid screeching into the void, isn't it? Blitzkrieg.
It is. Mm-hmm. They're throwing mud, and a lot of this stuff isn't sticking, because what he's doing is popular. He's saving people money. Here's another one. I think this one... When was that? Oh, that's 2025. One of these, I think. Trump's illegitimate power grab brings US closer to dictatorship, apparently. This is another one that Trump's acting like a dictator. But of course, all of the checks and balances still apply to Trump much the same as they do any other president. It's just that there aren't going to be many checks and balances because the branches support him.
Didn't he win the popular vote?
He did.
So doesn't that mean by definition he cannot be a dictator then?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm. And here's another one. Trump's dictatorial theory of presidential power, what the executive orders in the aggregate tell us. Of course, actually, Biden opened the door for this one, because Biden issued 17 executive orders. I think it was either in his first week or first 2 weeks, which was the equivalent of the first 2 months of Trump's first presidency. And so Trump thought, well, that's a good idea. Let's do even more of that. So, your guy did this first. The window is broken already when he found it.
I've never thought that there's ever been anything close to a dictatorial president. You'll find people say that Abraham Lincoln was a dictator. I mean, he did suspend habeas corpus for a while, but it was during war. But he wasn't a dictator. He won elections, open, free elections. Someone said FDR was a dictator. Well, no, he won the elections fair and square, or more or less fair and square. So they're not a dictator. You can criticise that they're more authoritarian than you might have liked, but they're not a dictator by definition.
It's very
they won
word,
open and free elections, so they're not a dictator.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's similar to the word fascism, where it's used so liberally and inappropriately,
right? Exactly.
That it just weakens the term.
Yeah.
And here's one from CNN. Trump 2.0 versus the US Constitution, annotated. All of a sudden, CNN cares about the US Constitution, which is difficult to believe. Here's Politico. This was from 2016, when Trump didn't do nearly as much, but they were trying the same thing then as well, is worth pointing out. Trump versus the Constitution, a guide. It may be true that Donald Trump has read the Constitution, but it's unclear if he understands it. The most condescending byline I've ever read.
It's the most classic thing. It's almost sort of the last refuge often, is it? That they're just stupid. Do you remember a few weeks ago when people like AOC were just trying to make out that Musk isn't intelligent?
Yeah.
It's just saying it's just pure lies. Do you remember at the beginning of the Ukraine war, they were trying to make out that Putin's about to die. He's very ill and he's about to die. Or that Trump doesn't understand the Constitution. It's like, who are you trying to fool? Who are you trying to kid?
It's not that complicated.
It's not very complicated at all, no. Right.
And here's another one from the New York Slimes, as you called it. Trump's actions have created a constitutional crisis, scholars say. Who are these scholars?
Yeah, who are the scholars?
Urban scholars, perhaps. Here's the BBC. Legal showdown looms as Trump tests limits of presidential power, which isn't as egregious as some of the other ones. He
sort of is doing that. That's
he
sort
is
of,
a little bit, yeah.
Fair,
it's not that
reasonable
unreasonable
to say that. I mean, but I think not all. I was about to say all presidents. Probably not all presidents, but most presidents will be doing that, and prime ministers and chancellors, heads of state all over the world, all the time, on and off, will be testing the limits of their power. Sort of in the nature.
It's expected,
Yeah, sort of.
Well, the idea is, are you going to do more of what you want to do or less? Generally speaking, people like to do more of what they want to do. I'm no psychologist. Oh, wait, I am. Donald Trump keeps teasing a third term. Here's what to know.
Does he?
I would be
say a single word about that.
I would be very surprised about this. This is what they're trying to say. He's trying to This is trying to sell the dictator line.
Yeah.
I don't think actually he'll want to at that age. To be honest, he's quite old as is. He's doing quite well for his age. To give him credit. But I think part of the reason that he's appointed J.D. Vance as his vice president is that he's sort of appointed the person who he feels is a good successor to him, right? Whereas in his first presidency, he went for someone who sort of, in Mike Pence, the original justification for that is he's someone who's very different to Trump. Whereas J.D. Vance, in terms of his views and the policies he supports, is quite similar to Trump. And so I think that's the thinking there.
And there's no way for him to have a third term unless they were to repeal. There's something in the Constitution now, whether it was an amendment or something, it's set in stone. Because it wasn't until FDR that it was actually written into law, into statute, that you can't have more than 2 terms. It was always just done by... it wasn't written in law, but now it is. So he can't have a third term unless he were to repeal that. But yeah, I just don't see it. It's just clear. It seems to be complete nonsense from Time.
I think it's trying to sell the dictatorial angle, isn't it? Time
magazine, just to mention if anyone doesn't know, is about deep state as it gets.
Absolutely.
Go down that rabbit hole if you dare.
So.
And CBS
has gone a bit off the rails because they're talking about how free speech caused the Holocaust somehow. It's just, the Germans were just shouting people to death, apparently. I don't know. The German accent sometimes can be a bit intimidating, but it does not actually kill people.
At the bottom of the swamp, you will find Time Magazine and CBS with their loudspeakers screaming up from the bottom of the swamp.
So this is just desperation, trying to throw anything in that direction. And then NBC were even trying to blame Trump for the Toronto plane crash. And that's a Canadian plane crash, by the way, Toronto, Canada. They're trying to blame that on Trump for some reason, which happened. This happened very recently.
Is there any rationale or reason to say that? I mean, what?
Well, they're trying to say that because he did those things with the... he did stuff to do with air travel, didn't he?
Oh, all right.
And they're saying, oh, it's causing problems in America, and now they're even saying it for Canada. I don't think so. You know, if you if you make cuts to funding and things like that, and the planes start falling out of the sky, I don't think it's it's not, you haven't got enough cash in the bank to fly the planes, is it? They're not run out of fuel and just dropped. That's not how it works. It's a silly argument.
Yeah, completely silly.
And so I just wanted to illustrate how no matter what they're trying here, it doesn't seem to be working. This isn't sticking.
Yeah.
And they sort of are aware of it as well, and it's getting increasingly desperate. But I'll leave it there.